This is a test to see how the cleaned dictating machine is working. I was having a lot of trouble on my interview a couple of days ago with Bob Haynes. Now I'm going to put the machine a little bit closer to my voice to see whether this picks up in volume, and then I'm going to pull it down as if I were interviewing a prospect. Good evening, friends. This is a test, and I'm checking with Bob Haynes as to his military career. This is an interview by Roland Matthies for the Clark County Historical Society on September 26, 1997, at the home of James Wilkerson, a longtime native of Springfield and a longtime lifetime member of First Lutheran Church. The purpose of the interview is to learn all we can for the archives at the church of its history with particular relationship to the Wilkerson family. Okay, Jim, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Roland. I guess I start with the fact that I have been a member for more than 60 years. I was confirmed in 1932, and at that time the church was just about 100 years old. Not quite right. Okay. Now, in looking back at the history of the church, we find that many milestones have been established through these years. The first recollection I have of a milestone is the purchase of the house on West High Street in 1949, then followed by the remodeling of the assembly room dedicated October 14, 1951. Probably the most significant thing in my memory is that in 1952 a bold decision was made to conduct a campaign to tear down the houses back of the church, including a small restaurant, and to build a 3-story educational building. The $90,000 campaign was successful and ground was broken in 1954. Following fall, at a total cost of $180,000, the building was completed, and to my knowledge and thoughts today, that still is the most significant thing that's happened at our church. For it allowed us to combine our Sunday schools, to have room for conferences, to have an office for the pastor, and it really made the big difference in First Lutheran Church. I happened to be on the council during that period, and it was a very exciting time. I must give much of the credit for this remarkable accomplishment to John Coons. He pushed it, and he chaired it, and he raised the money, and it should have been named the John D. Coons Extension.
I agree. Yeah, that's for sure.
So well, then we have had some other rather significant things happen. I would say that prior to the building of the 3-story building, we had to buy the lot next door, and we had to later on tear down the old building there, and it is now a parking lot. This, I think, was significant. among other things that happened during my tenure was the going to a grace giving. Pastor Rue, after he came, decided this was the way to raise money, and there were no drives or campaigns for several years. At first it was rather successful, and I was on the finance committee at that time. But as the years went by, it did not meet our budget, and we have now decided that we must go out and have campaigned and push the stewardship more in the direction of giving than it was during the grace period. I think that one of the significant things about the finance of the church is in some 50 years we can find in the investment of over $1 million have been invested, and we now have a large and modern church building with no debt. I think that's very significant for a congregation of our size. Now, Roland, what else can I tell you?
I think in addition to the financial figure of what we have put into the plant, there is a figure of how much endowment we have. Do you have that handy?
The endowment, as I recall the last time I looked at it, was some amount over $200,000. And my personal feeling as far as that goes is that the endowment is not a significant thing, and as money is given to the church through donations and also significant amounts from wills, I think that money should be immediately put into some worthy cause for the church. A large endowment, I feel personally, is detrimental to any church. It makes life too easy for the present congregation. Mm-hmm. And so we have been very, very blessed with a lot of bequests. And the bequests have really been significant in letting us meet our budget. Our regular giving at this time and for some years previous has not met the budget. But through the wills, we have been able to do it, and we have received significant amounts in the last 5 years through the wills of various members.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jim, let's go back now to your childhood. Tell us something about your family, that is your parents, and then how many brothers and sisters you had and so on, and leading up to your courtship of a certain beautiful young lady that you're still married to.
Well, in 1922, when Jean and I were about 2.5 years old, we met in the baby room of the church. and so we've known each other a very long time, and in May of 1944, we were married, and have been married now 52 years. As far as the family goes, my mother was very active in the church for many, many years. She was the first woman to serve on the church council.
Is that right?
And in 1967. So she also was very active in the women's groups and was probably as significant a member as we had in the early 1930s and 40s. She was on the committee that selected Pastor Rue after Dr. Myers left, or well, he wasn't a doctor, I guess. But I've always been very proud of what my mother did. Jean and I, before we were married, we were attended the centennial dinner held in 1941. And the Reverend Clyde Zander was pastor at that time, and he said that significant things were yet to come. So in 1951, or 1991, we both, Gene and I, served on the sesquicentennial celebration committee. And we look back now to see how true the words of Dr. Zander were. After Dr. Zander, we had he came.
Dr. Rilling?
Yeah, Rilling. And Dr. Rilling married Gene and me, and was not there very long because he was made the head of the of our synod, and unfortunately was in an automobile accident that caused his death prematurely. After that came Dr. or was he Dr.?
Fred Miller?
Dr. Miller, who served for several years and was then made head of the what is the name of that?
Mueller
Yeah.
Center.
Center, and at that time we got Larry Rue for pastor, who served for almost 30 years. After that, we were without a pastor for a couple of years, and then David Imhoff came, and in my judgment has done a tremendous job in building the church back up and creating a lot of activities. My early days, I recall going to Sunday school and having Colonel Haynes as my teacher.
Is that right?
He was a very, very good, and we always enjoyed that Sunday school during my early teens. He was a very interesting man and is still active in the church at over 90 years old.
I happened to be in the process of interviewing him this past week regarding his military career, and now I'm going to interview him about his experiences at First Church. He has a number of expletives that he adds to his conversation that have come out of his military career. He is indeed a wonderful character.
Well, you know, we talked a bit about in 1941 celebrating our 100th year, and in 1991 our 150th year, but we also had a rather significant 120th year celebration, and that was really, at the time we completely remodeled the assembly room. It has been remodeled since then, but that was really a big change in the assembly room downstairs. The celebration for the 120th year was held at the Masonic Temple and was very well attended, and Gene and I were again fortunate to attend that 20 years after the 1941. I think we've seen some very significant things in the last few years. The remodeling or refurbishing of our organ, which is one of the finest in the city. The new kitchen, the new entrance, the new restrooms, and the chapel are all beautiful, along with the courtyard. So we have, through the years, as I've joined, made some very, very remarkable accomplishments. And it is very unusual for a church that has done what we've done to be debt-free. There are not too many that are that fortunate.
I think we're enjoying a good relationship with the downtown churches, thanks to our present pastor Imhoff. He's doing a great job of cooperating with the other people, particularly Christ Church and Covenant Presbyterian. I think that's great. Now back to your own family. You had how many children?
We have 4 children, and we have a daughter daughter and 3 sons. 2 of the boys are in Detroit area. 1 lives here, and my daughter is in Cincinnati. Through the years, they all were active in the church. Unfortunately, they're not so active now since they're out of town. But my grandmother, speaking of family, was also, her name was Mrs. Hutchins, and she was very active back in the early days of the church. On the cooking end of it, there were some famous old names back, Mrs. Heiserman, and I can't recall a couple others, but those women, when I was just a small boy, were very, very active and kept things going down at First Lutheran when times were not so good in the 20s and early 30s. My grandmother was very active. Later on, my mother was, and so our family goes way back in the church, and we're very proud of First Lutheran Church.
You remember the days when the choir used to be up front?
Well, yes, I do, and I remember previous to that, the quartet for many years was an outstanding group. There was, let's see, Irma Littleton and Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Burley. Do you remember her?
No, I didn't know her.
Yeah, she was one, and
Margie Coons?
Margie Coons, yes. And so for many years, that group, and then we decided to go, or that group broke up, the quartet, and we decided to have the choir up in front, and we had a choir loft there. Later on, we put the choir up in the balcony, but I remember the choir very well.
Do you remember me as the bass soloist?
Absolutely, I do, and I think that was a good move. The quartet was very talented, and I don't think there's any question of that, but it did not bring in enough people that also had talent, and the policy has gone to using as many people as we can in various activities. We have now a sheet of paper that you fill out with all the things that you could do or would do, and I feel that the more people that are active, the better off we are, and we're going in that direction. And I think the choir way back was one of the first steps to do that, because it was a rather large choir to have some 30 to 40 people in it.
Right, I got started when we joined the church in the spring of '43, when Dr. Rilling was just new. And he got after me, and I got the great sum of $25 a month for being the bass soloist.
Well, it was a good move, and it was a good choir. I think the music at the church through the years has been outstanding in comparison to many other churches, and we had a longtime organist. It's no longer with us, but we've had some very, very fine organists, and I said previously we have one of the finest organs in the city, and we've also from time to time had other musical people such as violinists, trumpet, and so forth that adds to that.
The quartet that I sang with had Marga Coons, Maurice Colley, and Paul Mattis.
That's right.
You remember Paul never did join our church. He stayed at St. John's, but he sang with us every Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he was very good. He was a very good tenor, and that was a good choir. As I say, years before, I don't know how many years that choir or that quartet sang, but it was for some number of years, and I remember the first ones well. They were somewhat older than I was. Chase Patterson, who's been an active member, a very good friend of mine, and we've been involved in a lot of various activities for the church and committees. His father was in the first choir, and Irma Littleton, and who else was in it? I'm not sure Paul Mattis wasn't in it before you were in it.
Yes, I think he was.
Yeah, yeah.
Bringing up the name of Littleton reminds me of a Mr. Littleton who always had his hand in his coat pocket because he had some deformity in it.
Yes.
And he was an usher.
Right. Yeah, he was,
And Art Lytle.
Art Lytle, yeah, indeed, and you can go back quite a ways on people like that. I recall some of the pillars of the church when I was a kid. Marion French was treasurer for many years, and he was good, and he was tough. When I served on the council, you didn't spend money without getting okay by Marion French, I tell you. And he was a fine man, and we were fortunate. Gene and I were in the same grade of school as his daughter, and she's now in Indianapolis and comes over once in a while.
Well, I had not known that.
Yeah, she was a very nice gal and active in the church, and certainly he was very much. You know, you go on back, people like Patterson. At one time, that Sunday school class of Mr. Patterson's had over 200 members.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that was in my grandfather and father both went to his Sunday school, and he was certainly an outstanding person, and had that Sunday school someplace. If I could find it, I have a picture of that Sunday school class.
Isn't the name of Zimmerman also connected with a Sunday school class?
Yep, Zimmerman and Patterson both. I think Zimmerman followed Patterson.
It must have been, because when I came along and Zimmerman had either retired or left this world, they asked me to take the class for a while.
Oh.
And the man who got me there was a man whose last name was Green, and he worked for Wagner Moving in the heavy hoisting business.
Yeah.
He was sort of the president of the class, but I never got to know Mr. Zimmerman.
Well, of course, I knew the Zimmermans, both the judge and his brother Charles. They were very active, and now their son is a regular member and active also. They go way, way back. One of their distant cousins or an uncle was pastor at one time before 1900.
I had not known that.
Of the Zimmermans. And if you look, one of the windows in the church is dedicated to him. Now, his name's not Zimmerman, but I think it's the second window coming in on the left side, and he was pastor just before 1900. So that family goes way back, and of course the judge was very active, and so was his brother. I think the judge was probably a little more active than Charles. But he was a very good member, and they were very faithful.
Was his name perhaps John?
John.
The judge was Charles.
Oh, the judge was Charles.
Yeah.
His name was John. John Zimmerman. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now the son is active along with his wife, and they're about my age, slightly younger, and they've been members well over 50 years, I'm sure. So the Zimmerman family and go way back. There are other families that I recall that were very active at time. Trying to think of some of those people.
I was thinking of Art Lytle as being somebody.
The Heisermans way back, and I just can't recall some of the names. but practically all churches are headed by a few families that really make the difference. And it's unfortunate that more people are not as active as they should be. I really believe that our church is dependent on a few in the leadership group, and still does to a degree. But I think now we're getting more people active than we've had for many years. I really do.
I think our pastor, in being so active with youth work, is going to build for the future.
Yeah, no
doing a good job.
No question of that I think he's going to concentrate on that area, and that is an area where we were weak for many years, and we paid the price. We lost, unfortunately, we lost a lot of our good members, or some of our good members, to other churches, and particularly the Grace Lutheran. But I think some of them are coming back, and I think that trend to go to Grace from our group has stopped.
I agree. Yeah. I see a nice group of young families getting very active. Now we got to convince them to support us.
That's right. That's right. Well, unfortunately, just in the past few weeks, we've lost two of the Wittenberg pastors that were, of course, active at Wittenberg and didn't always attend, but were very good First Lutherans. And the tendency has been through the years for the college to push people to the Fourth Lutheran, which really was a church college, I guess, way back. But we've had several significant members come from the college to First Lutheran, including you, Roland, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you. Well, I think this pretty much winds up what I wanted to get from you, Jim. It's a good interview. What I will do now is to have this typed and give it back to you to go over and make any editing you want to do, and add.
I may be able to think of some more.
Add some more names.
Names. I'm not very good on names, and never have been, which is a bad fault of mine. But I can't do very well and remember names. I know the faces, but I can't put the names with them. But I must say, in concluding, that I have enjoyed First Lutheran for many, many, many years, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a very, very wonderful place to worship.
Thank you very much, good friend. Barb, that's it. There's nothing on the other side. Thank you.